Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. And this is Chris Parker, and I'm with Reinier Willems. And Reinier and I have met, well, quite a while ago when we were both working at a large multinational called LeasePlan. So we have a shared shady past, although he did ask me not to talk about his shady past. Maybe we'll get into his real shady past. We'll see. But I've been in touch with Reinier over the years, and his passion is about value. And I'm sure over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk a lot about value and what I think is his amazing perspective on that, and sometimes confronting perspective on that. So Reinier, welcome. Could you please, share with us all, what is it that you do, and why do you do what you do?
Well, hi, Chris. Thanks. Great to be on the show. What is it that I do? At the moment, I help companies to better express the value and the value outcomes of the services they provide to other companies. So pretty much in the business to business sphere. And why is it that I do what I do? Is that also, even in our joint shady past, Chris, I've seen sometimes, especially if companies deliver services, sometimes the value outcomes of those services are not seen by decision makers or stakeholders in the customer organization. And that's a shame, because then the focus goes back to price. It supports commoditization. It's a word that I dislike with passion. And it's also a shame because you may be providing a lot of service for which you need to maintain resources that go unseen. And in the words of Warren Buffett, price is what you pay, value is what you get. Price is really clear often, the value not so clear. And again, that's a shame. Sometimes if the value is not clear, companies buy something from suppliers that their colleagues might not even want or use, and that also leads to waste. And you also see that in consumer markets, and that is one of the other reasons why I think it's good in many ways to renew a focus on actual and factual value.
Well, it makes me think about, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make any sound? And so if, potential value is being provided to a company, from a supplier in this context, and there's no one there to appreciate it, is it actual value then?
Yeah. Well, you can debate that, and some will say yes, and others will say no. You have delivered it and you did a great job, but if nobody sees it, perception may become reality, because if for the customer it's not there, it is not there, and they will not pay for it, or do not feel inclined to pay for something they didn't experience. And that's the issue with large business to business services, especially if those are high value services. You have to deal with complex decision-making group with many decision makers and stakeholders. And some will see or experience the value of the service provided, while others may not. And still, they also have to make that decision. So it's therefore a good idea to make sure that all stakeholders or all decision makers see or experience that value in some kind of way. But then again, that is where it becomes difficult, because value is very much in the eyes of the beholder. And so you also need to understand and learn what is of value for a specific person, specific decision maker. And that is easier said than done, but definitely possible.
Yeah, it's definitely in the eyes of the beholder, I think. So, Reinier, you have been passionate about value for, well, as long as I've known you, years. Why is this so important to you? What motivates you and to keep thinking not only practically, because I know, sometimes you're working with large organizations, bringing this perspective and value into them, but and also, intellectually and sometimes academically studying value. Why are you so busy with value?
I think value is beautiful. It's why it's the essence. It's why customers buy from you. It's why customers may want to take the effort to change. It's why customers may take a risk to test you as a new supplier. It's why customers buy from you again if they know and if they've seen that relationship provides value. That's one part. The other part is also more from a personal point of view. I see that happening now also in consumer markets. I see kids buying lots of stuff online just because it's cheap, and I see that with my own kids. Sometimes they get I don't know, they order a pocket knife somewhere online, Chinese web shop, and it arrives, and they take it out of the plastic package, and the thing breaks immediately. And so that has been shipped over from China to the Netherlands, and that has produced emissions while producing it. And now they need to dispose of it immediately. And so it needs to be burned somewhere in a garbage disposal facility. That's not good. It has no value. It has negative value in that sense. Yeah.
Well, to challenge that, I think depends on the definition of value, because every step of waste and destruction along that whole chain, someone has made money.
Yeah.
So there is an audience that would say, hey, this is very valuable. GDP is going up. Life is good. Sorry about the knife. Sorry about the child. Sorry about the environment. But we're getting value from this.
Yeah, and true. And somebody is getting value out of it. And I understand that, but where is the balance? If you talk about a supplier and a customer and everybody involved in a network, it's good to be more transparent on what's your value perspective. What do you seek to get out of it? Recently, we saw comments in the media about fashion companies. They said, "Oh, we have 10 collections every year." And the fashion company said, well, our customers are not really interested in that. And we are getting really tired to make 10 collections a year. Who really wants that at the end? It turns out to be that the fashion houses that really started to make 10 collections a year were also owned by private equity or were publicly listed, shareholders. And they had only one objective, and that's growth and to maximize their value. And so you need to see that sometimes in balance. And in this case, and also in the case of that cheap pocket knife, that balance is leading towards one entity in the equation, and might not be the most optimal one. Yeah. Other perspective is, for example, I've been working in the healthcare sector recently. You see also an increased focus on value there. I've seen things that just don't make sense. In hospitals, and the way services are being delivered, sometimes not even being necessary. And yet we all see that the Dutch healthcare sector cannot go on this way. If we do that, in 10 years' time, it will explode, so to say, or implode rather. And so there you also see a renewed focus on value and the notion of value-based healthcare that is really becoming a mainstream topic these days.
When you're talking about the shareholder incentive, maybe that also brings up the conversation around socialized medicine, because if it is simply a profit motive, perhaps that sometimes can skew the value perception or the actual definition of value, but that's probably a whole other conversation. I'm curious, Reinier, you said why you're so busy with this is because value is beautiful. Why for you have you come to discover that value is beautiful? Like what's the why behind the why here?
That's a difficult question, hard to say actually. It's also dealing with like to see results. like to see improvement, like to see happy customers, happy people. Value is also in business to business relationships often very personal. And I've worked with procurement directors that said, well, I'm here only to rationalize the purchase decision. And by the way, I'm going to commoditize you. Okay, that was in the days of that multinational company that we both were in, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's great, but what else can I do for you? And then he said, I need somebody to watch my back. I said, the different country organizations of my company ordering vehicles without me knowing. And I need somebody to monitor that for me. And he wanted this and he wanted that. And I said, I need to be sure that it's going according to policy. Otherwise, my ass is on the line. I said, okay. And see, there you are. He's talking about personal value, almost in the same sentence. And so it's there. It's always there. And so value is a complex thing, actually. It's a simple word, but it has many aspects to it. And can be personal, can be economical, can be operational, can be relational, can be functional. So it has many phases. And I think that variety also makes it interesting.
Yeah, it almost sounds like it humanizes the transaction, at least in business to business, because the value perception is very much a human thing. And you are what I really enjoy, and you've helped me out on different occasions with different companies and initiatives to come in and you inspire really a laser-like focus on value, and you have some tools and techniques and frameworks for that. Can you share a little bit about, if an organization is scratching their head on, do my customers really care about what I'm doing? Do they value me? How can they regain or create their own internal focus on value?
Yeah, good question. Challenging one too. It can be difficult. Sometimes you take it for granted, and everybody takes it for granted in a business relationship. And if you want to become more specific about value, you might be disturbing something that is going on by itself for a long time. Renewals and just continue the relationship. Sometimes if you say, okay, if you have delivered a project, or after working together for a year, you together summarize the value outcomes of what you've achieved together, can be slightly daunting or challenging. Spoken with account managers that said, yeah, but if we make it so specific, maybe they will find or discover it's not really that much value at the end of the day that we've contributed. I said, okay. The question then is, if that's really the case, it will come out sooner or later. And if you really don't deliver value, you have a problem of a different nature. If you do provide value, it's just good to summarize and to show together. But it can be difficult because if you, and I'm a marketeer, and Chris, I like to talk in marketing terms. Warmer, deeper, richer, better, or new, always works. But also there, during the previous economic crisis, we were talking with procurement directors. And we said, well, we have a great solution for your global fleet. And will you get more satisfied drivers? The guy said, well, that sounds expensive. I said, what do I buy for that? So I'm not interested. I said, show me the money. And so sometimes that means that in business settings, you need to try to quantify value. And that is difficult for many people. It's difficult for marketeers. Sometimes also difficult for account managers. And it's a different skill. And it puts it all out on the table. It makes it more transparent. This is something that you can now do from your own motivation. Or sooner or later, one thing is for certain, it will become more transparent. If you don't do it and others do it a little bit better, that will get the preference.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty. You don't have to be perfect straight away. Just a little bit better than the alternative can get you a long way.
I imagine that the people you work with that are working on this value discussion are either believers in value and therefore are looking to enhance their that they're naturally inclined to create more value than they're capturing from their customers, for example, or if they're the cost managing procurement person, then that's when the quantification really matters. So is that what you see as well, that there's different people have different mindsets or starting paradigms around value? And
Yeah.
yeah,
certainly. There are companies that have spent a lot of effort and a lot of marketing and sales resource and in providing more packaging around what it is that they provide, and more layers of packaging, shiny vapors around that. It will come out what's the core, what you really provide. That is a movement that is happening. Transparency is happening. So that is one. If you're an absolute cost leader, that's fine too, because then that's the value that you provide. It's a little bit more simple, if you will. But if you provide a lot of services around the product, say you're selling an MRI scanner. MRI scanners are complex things and expensive, easily €1 million. And even there you see that in that market, with something so complex and expensive, somebody told me who supplies MRI scanners, a big Dutch company, said, yeah, it's more and more seen as a commodity.
Incredible.
So that cannot be true. It's incredible. But as long as it meets certain criteria, quality and safety standards, all of a sudden procurement departments of hospitals say, well, yeah, that's more for me. It's more or less the same as that other brand. And so they start to deliver a lot of service around that MRI scanner. And there they also have the challenge. Before we delivered some of those services for free around the MRI scanner. And now it's becoming slowly our core business. And that's why we need to shape up in being able to articulate and demonstrate the value outcomes of these services. Otherwise, they're not going to be prepared to pay for it. And it's not going to be sustainable.
And I suppose then that is on part of the journey towards a subscription model type of different type of commercial relationship. Say, okay, well, if this thing is a commodity, then, well, why don't we just wrap all these services up and you just pay for what you need? In IT land where I am more, it's also fascinating to see. I'm involved in this with a company right now that has an older ERP system that they have purchased with a sort of a perpetual license plus maintenance, and now the new versions are all cloud-based and subscription-based, and when you do that math, it's for an energy company I worked with recently, we did that math, and the new software on the subscription model was I think literally 100 times more over 5 years. It was just shocking as well, and then when you start pushing back and say, well, wait a second, I think I'm getting the same value here, meaning that, if the transaction throughput being managed by that system is effectively the same, and I'm not winning any other productivity benefits, then why? What's happening? Planned obsolescence in order to get me into subscription model. So it is, and again, if you're only talking about the cost, then it becomes a very awkward discussion very fast. So what are some I guess some tips and tricks that maybe entrepreneurs or businesses can do themselves to, I guess, clarify their value proposition or make sure that their customers actually appreciating their value?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with insight. And because we're talking about at the end of the day, you want to be the supplier that, or the alternative that provides the most relevant value. Now, what is relevance? And relevance exists by the virtue of insight. And so what is value for a customer? And we marketeers, we've got to that. We make customer journeys and buyer personas. Buyer persona is good, it's already a step better, but would assume that if I make a buyer persona of a procurement or a chief procurement officer, they all are the same. That's not the case, just like not all marketeers are the same. But it's a good step forward already. But look at the key decision makers and try to understand what is value for them in their role, what can be personal value. What is the business value they need to generate in their role or with their department? And how does that link together for different departments in the customer organization that you're selling to? That insight is important. And what I see happening is sometimes, account managers or marketeers or salespeople, they analyze the company, make the SWOT analysis or make an account plan. But I'm missing the detailed insight of what is of actual value for that customer. And then again, sometimes value is an assumption unless confirmed by the customer too. So it's good to just ask that and interview that. And what you will find is sometimes your customer will not be able to express that in clear terms, herself or himself to you either. Now, that is where you need to pay attention. If your customer has a kind of a vague idea of what the outcome should be, you're setting yourself up for potential failure. You need to be specific about that. Pushing a little bit the customer to become more specific about that, you do a customer already a good service. That's also what we did with that mobility company that we both worked. We had a customer that says, I want to save cost. Well, so that's great. How much do you want to save, and what are you willing to do for that? Are you willing to limit the vehicle choice of your employees? Are you willing to limit the size of the vehicles that they are driving? What are you prepared to do in that case? And if you get that specific, then you have a good basis to define and determine what the most relevant value is together. There you see, you need to do that ideally together with the customer, so you can be sure and come to a solution that is yours, but also very much the customer's.
Yeah, and one little side note mostly for the American audience, that pretty much in most countries outside of the US, managerial roles in corporates oftentimes come with a company car. And so and the company provides that car, and it's part, basically it's a perk for employment there. And then there's multinational companies like LeasePlan, where we worked, and also Athlon, ALD, different companies around the world that provide that. So that just, if people are confused about what we're talking about, that's what we're talking about. Reinier, in startup land, validating the value with a customer before you build is really the core premise of methodologies like Lean Startup. And in that, I'm not sure if it's in that methodology, but it's certainly in my methodology of life, to seek a customer that will actually pay, ideally before you build. And do you agree that a propensity to pay or an actual paying customer is a proxy of value, or is that too simple?
It is a proxy, and it's an important one. But it is simple. I would say it's not the only one.
Oh, okay. If you're in startup land, and if you have this idea, and you either have if it's digital, some sort of clickable walkthrough or a MVP, do you have any ideas on how we could test value before we actually double down on build in that case, other than the proxy of payment?
Well, I think you need to be, you start to be very clear on what the value outcome can be for a customer. Depending on what it is that you deliver, and then it becomes difficult because you have little proof. If you're starting, you have little experience to build on. As a side note, it's one of the most or the highest, let me rephrase that. One of the the most valuable activities you can do as a company is to track value that you've already delivered. Go sit together with the customer, see what the value outcomes is, agree on those together, and collecting those value facts. You learn from that, that is one. And on the other hand, you create the most powerful sales material you will ever have. That is factual value delivered to all the customers. Right? But you're now a startup, you don't have that yet. Somehow you will have most likely studies or other information that can say, hey, in this case, these could be the value outcomes. And hopefully together with a customer, calculate together based on his or her situation or company or own customers, how could that translate to your world, to your company, and to your customer? And together make an image of that. Communicating value is difficult as well, Chris. And so you got to quantify, but it really helps to visualize as well. And that's one of the other aspects, how value can be beautiful. And there can be very nice ways to visualize value that will help to paint a picture really for whomever you're trying to convince.
Do you have a story about that? Meaning, you really triggered me with the, your sales or account people should be tracking value. And then with that tracked value, that can create the ultimate sales material. Can you tell a story around that to bring it to life? Because it sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, again, let me not talk about something else than mobility, because there we've also done it. But if you look at an interesting example, can be the medical domain. What you see is that if you are developing a new drug, you need to test that in many ways, and we also see that now with in the COVID era and the vaccines that are being developed. You need to test on multiple levels, and you need to have factual testing data. So pharma companies do have a lot of core value data, if you will, be it limited, but still there are some facts in there. Otherwise, it would not be allowed to the market. Now, here I see a company that tries to convince hospitals of a better treatment with better patient outcomes than all the other alternatives that are currently available. Still, it didn't work. Hospitals and the specialists the specialists did not want to change, or did not want to bother actually, because the message did not come out clear enough, obviously. And so they started with very simple visualizations, kind of infographics, what the patient outcomes would be, the value for the patient, what the value for the treatment specialist could be, but also the value for insurance companies that they were dealing with. And make a very high-level visualization with some data facts on that, started to loosen up and create opportunity for the conversation, and also now has led to a wide implementation of that treatment method really. And so you saw that also combining fact with visualizations made it easy also for members of the board of directors of a hospital to understand, hey, this is something we need to look into.
And I can imagine that in having myself, as you know, have been, coaching and advising on some of my initiatives that, we had something that we thought was, the best thing ever. And if you really struggle with communicating very simply what it is and what value it can create, then actually it doesn't really matter what you have, because people aren't going to get it and they're not going to buy it.
Yeah.
One of the artifacts, and I'm not sure what you call it, but I love it. It's I call it your value canvas. I don't know the word you use, but it's the honeycomb representation of the different value drivers of different types of buyers, at least like in a complex enterprise, sales setting. At least that's how I interpreted what I've seen from you as you've been doing some coaching and consulting for me in the past. How is that as a artifact or a tool, and how do you use that with people in your work?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's quite a fairly simple method of sometimes I use it with commercial teams that sell a complex product, or maybe sometimes not such a complex product or service, and just do an exercise. You say, what is it that you sell? We take a certain service and we say, who are the key persons that are involved in the decision, or the beneficiaries of that service. Can be a patient, can be a healthcare provider, can be an insurance company. And now for the specific service, for each of those stakeholders, can you specify what the actual value is? Maybe economic value, operational value, or personal value, and do that exercise. And without exception, even seasoned account managers found it a challenging exercise to make it that specific for the different type of stakeholders and decision makers. Also did it with insurance companies, and they said, well, it's a challenging thing, but it's also it's actually weird that we are not able to make it that specific straight away, that it took us the effort. And on the other hand, it's always the realization at the end of that exercise. It's challenging, but you can be amazed in one afternoon how quick you can get a sharp vision on that. And so that serves a bit that purpose. And also the realization that value is a complex construct.
And Reinier, last question before we wrap up. I can imagine that there will be people listening who are saying, I want some of that magic value sauce. How do you help leaders of organizations create more value? And
Yeah.
What is it that you actually do? Can you describe that really quickly?
Yeah, you need to also organize value within your company, and leadership is important because at one point in time it will really help you as a company to speak a common value language within your company, marketing, commerce, or account management, sales, but also product management. And it's nice to be customer focused, but what does it mean? And that can be, you can keep this very nice and vague. But if you want to make it more specific, your customer focus, you focus on customer value and set that as a central focal point within your company. And I see it can provide a great set of boundaries, a great set of guardrails for companies that are moving towards a more agile organization. That is the thing that will bind the different disciplines, different departments together in a joint focus. And as a leader, it will help you in value creation, and it can also contribute quite directly to your mission statement, also when it comes to being a sustainable and responsible company.
Incredible. So for everyone who's listening, you can find Reinier on LinkedIn, so Reinier Willems, and I'll put the link in the show notes on ebullient.com/podcast. And Reinier, thank you so much. I cannot get enough of you, as you know. So typically when I'm in, the shit, trying to sell something to an audience that doesn't understand it, that's oftentimes when we talk and you shine light and confront thinking and confront assumptions, and it's challenging and beautiful. So Reinier, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate the time.
Pleasure.
Learn more at ebullient.com/podcast.